things that we talk about that leads us to Merdeka. And in the studio, we're speaking to Faridah Hameed. She is going to update us on Mothers of Merdeka.
That's right. What's that? That's a pretty heavy title, Faridah. Welcome back to the studio. Tell us what we're talking about today.
Yeah, well, because in memory of Merdeka month, I am a bit of a history buff. So I've always been very curious every time Merdeka rolls around about the role that women played in the independence fight as well as after Merdeka. And so what I've discovered is that a lot of the information about Merdeka, we see all the narrative about Merdeka, the images, the stories, the books that have all been written, are basically from a male perspective.
That's
right?
why it's always been called history,
yes,
right?
History.
Never
so
her story.
From a male perspective.
Yeah.
And so when you start digging a little bit and you start looking for stories about the women pre-independence and during the struggle for independence, there's hardly anything. In fact, history is skeletal, is silent actually, and skeletal at best about some of the women who shaped the story of our independence struggle.
So how are we going to be able to delve into those stories when it doesn't exist?
Well, that is why we need to start talking about it, and I want to bring up some of the names and some of the stories so that we put it out into the mainstream. And hopefully maybe someday we'll have books and more information about them. So shall I start?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I want to start with Tunku's wife.
Okay.
Tunku's third wife was Tun Sharifah Rodziah, and why she's important is because she was his wife during the independence struggle. Now, if you go to her Wikipedia page, you'll find one solitary line about her influence with Tunku during the independence struggle, and this is all it says. Sharifah Rodziah played an important role in rallying political support for her husband during Malaysia's tumultuous formative years.
Wow, it sounds like a big role.
Yeah, but that's all.
Yeah.
Now, I went searching for more information about her. There's hardly anything about her. Now, this is just really sad because for a woman who was the wife of Malaysia's founding father, surely she was more than that.
Yeah.
Right? Yes, she took care of the children. They had 5 children and all that, but she must have played a direct role in some form or manner.
I see a movie coming up.
There's nothing about her. Now, the other lady I want to highlight is Tun Dr. Fatimah Hashim. And what we know of her story is that she joined the independence struggle when she was in her 20s. She became the first female cabinet minister. Now, from the information about her joining the independence struggle in her 20s to her becoming cabinet minister, there's nothing. We have no stories about her. But can you imagine the stories she must have had as a 20-something in the 1940s joining the independence struggle and being a woman? But we know nothing about her story. So I think there is a real need for us, not just as a gender issue, but I think as a national historical background to what led to the struggles and what role these women played beyond just being mothers and the kaum ibu. You know, we've read kaum ibu was before Wanita UMNO and all that. And, you know, I don't think we can talk about a future if we don't know where we come from.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I like the fact that, you know, of course we have a theme every year. We talk about, you know, our songs and our themes, and of course we have all these ads. But it's just skimming the surface when we don't really know the stories, the struggles of the people, and particularly the women who were involved in that struggle.
Speaking of the theme, which Malaysia Day today is Sayangi Malaysia Ku Malaysia Bersih. I think one of the key points that you're bringing up is that are we really aware of what where we came from, what the struggles have been in order for us to get there, and I think that connection is lost because we don't really know all the points and all the stories that have made us who we are.
This is where the problem is. This is why we keep talking in circles about our race and our religion and our differences, because if we look back to what happened, everybody played their part. The Chinese, the Indians, the Malays, and the women, everybody played a part. And while I think themes and songs and all these things are important because it does unite us, but it feels like there's an emptiness, for me personally at least. I feel there's such an emptiness there because we are skimming the surface, but the substance has been lost, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I think I want to ask the question because we're in a space where, as we're going into Merdeka, we still find that, you know, it's a struggle. Racial relations are still tense. There's still a lot of this, you know, bickering going on. And when we bring women into the picture, I think we find ourselves perhaps a little bit more, I don't know, are women more accommodating? Are women more inclusive?
More sacrificing?
Are they the ones that can bring people together as opposed to, you know, you always talk about men and having testosterone and having a little bit more of that competitive drive. So the women are the, I don't know, are they the mediators? That's the question that we want to ask.
Right, and that's the story we don't know. We don't know what role they played beyond being the wives. And also, like, they follow the husbands on the campaign trail and they hold the babies and all that, but we don't know the story. And I also want to talk about, I mean, I was just really curious, so I checked the websites of the three main former political parties, right? UMNO, MCA and MIC. And what I found even to this day is that UMNO doesn't have, they have the Wanita UMNO there after UMNO Youth.
Yeah.
So the Wanita is after UMNO Youth. Okay. And they had the name of some of the historical women, no photos, no stories. But I want to bring out one of the key figures in the independence struggle. This was Datuk Siti Rahimah Kassim.
Yes.
Okay.
And she is known actually as the person who gave up her gold bangle that her father had given her at her wedding to Tunku when they were actually at a conference, independence conference in Malacca. And Tunku didn't have money to go to England. They didn't have enough money to fly. And she actually took out her bangle at that conference and said, I'm contributing to this. Now, isn't that a fascinating story? But that's all we know. We don't know anything more about her. Her story, sometimes when Merdeka comes up, we have a little bit about her. But that's a fascinating story. So, and when it comes to MCA, the founder of MCA was Tun Sharifah Rodziah. We know nothing of his wife, who was Yo Yok Nyo. She's nowhere mentioned in anywhere. Even when I Googled her, couldn't find anything about her. And finally, I want to talk about MIC. MIC's website, I don't know what is going on. There's like, it's a mess. Yeah, so it's really bad. But we know Tun Sambanthan, some of us who are older, we know Tun Sambanthan, and we know his wife, Toh Puan Uma, was very active in the pre-independence and the post-independence struggle.
Right.
But again, her story, what we know is, yes, she followed the husband, but what was her personal story, you know, her struggle? What did she have to sacrifice? What did she do in going out and speaking to the women and getting them on board with this independence struggle? So all of that.
So many reference points, so many lessons to learn, so comparisons
many
to
fascinating women.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Strong women back in the day when they had to deal with the, you know, the so-called the glass ceilings and the challenges, the cultural holdbacks.
So the question, of course, which it leads us to, is why do you think there's so little key information about their roles in achieving Merdeka?
Yeah, I think it's because the political parties themselves have never really invested in the history of how they came to be. But even with our historians in general, I think, and I'm not blaming anybody, I just think in the early days, of course, when you talk about Tunku and the negotiations, it was driven by the men. As in they were the face of it, right? So when they go to England, they're also dealing with all the men. So I understand that. But I think now, 62 years on, I think we have to start thinking about, you know, should we get books written? Should we have documentaries done about these women? So that this generation understands, and particularly in the female story for our women and girls, so that they understand that this idea of gender or femininity isn't something new. These women had none of the protections, many of them didn't have the kind of education, some of them were arrested and thrown in jail to fight for this independence. And they need to understand where they came from, that we all stand on their shoulders, you know?
Absolutely.
And of course, there's a lot of stories now about how women are very much a part of the Malaysian story, but we don't talk about women being part of the Malaysian story in the past.
That's right.
And that makes me sad.
But that's a cultural thing that happened in those days. You know, women always took a back seat to whoever was their spouse or their partner, and it has been always the women's role to be the sacrificial person. That yes, I will stand behind that and support.
And even if I did have take some heroic action, I will always just remain in the background. I won't shout about it. I won't, you know, ask for glory and all of that kind of thing. So none of that stories or any achievements got told based on that.
But I think I want to set the stage here where we're not talking about a female empowerment.
Exactly.
Because this can be skewed that way. Because at the end of the day, it's about balanced views. It's about hearing stories from both sides of the his and the her stories, and for us to be able to create a better perspective and understanding for us to move forward.
It's about having a more complete story of where we came from. And you cannot tell the story when you only have 50% of the story and 50% of the memories and the 50% of the recounting when you don't have the other 50%. And to me, that's really important. And coming back to the cultural thing, I think in those days, in the 40s and 50s, I think it was also global. I think if you think about the stories of other founding fathers, usually it was the men's story that was put out. But only lately, in the last, I think, 20 years or so, you hear about the other women. But I think in Malaysia, it's about time. We should do plays, we should do documentaries, we should do books about the role that these women played. The sad thing is that many of them, even their grandchildren, are quite old already now. And so, you know, we don't know where the archives are, we don't know where the photos are, we don't know what the memories are. And so we need to get on with it and get these stories told.
Right. One other thing that we always like when it comes around to Merdeka is, of course, the Merdeka ads. The
It's called the tearjerkers.
Yes, you know, you'll get us to that one tear. You try to balance that so it doesn't fall out of your eye. But yes, and why? Because it's you know, it's emotional, because it's engaging. What do you think of Merdeka ads, and have you seen any this year?
I haven't yet, I have to admit, but of course over the years I've seen many. Yes, it's very nostalgic, isn't it? And it makes us wish for sometimes a more peaceful time, a kinder time, a more generous time. But again, I tend to also look at it a little bit critically, in the sense that, again, what you see in the front is mainly the men and the iconic images. And I would like to see somebody do an ad, and I don't know if one has been done this year, where you actually have the women sort of being the heroes of the ad, of being the heroes of that story, beyond just the usual kind of stereotypical role. And I think that would be an interesting take, or an interesting angle for a new ad. So maybe next year, we'll see.
Yes, I think that you just gave some ad agencies a few tips for them to be able to create the next Merdeka campaign.
Here we go. Right. Any parting thoughts for Merdeka this year?
Yeah, I think like all of you, I'm sure there is a worry in my heart about where the national conversation is going. And it's becoming increasingly polarized, and that worries me. And I don't know what the answers are, because I'm not a political expert. But I think we all have to, in our little circles of influence, we need to make sure that people understand that we are all part of Malaysia. We all have a right to this country, and that we have all contributed throughout history. Every one of our ancestors, our parents, our grandparents came here to look for a better life, to create a better life for their children. And that story needs to be told to our children, as well as when we are in conversation with other people around us. And if these issues of polarization comes up, we must get people to understand that you don't take away anything from anybody by saying that we created this country together.
Yeah. I mean, of course, we need to remember where we have come from, what hurdles, what challenges we had, but also together looking forward and having that foresight to say, yes, we can do this together.
If I may quickly put something in, I think there's a space that we should not allow for people to so easily destroy what we have created over the last 62 years.
We are a success story with all our problems. Malaysia is a success story in a world that is rife with conflict and killing.
That's right.
So we have to be proud about that. Somehow, with all our mistakes, we have somehow still managed to keep it relatively.
All right, so on that note, let's go out and celebrate Malaysia in our homes, in the office, at the park, at the Mamak, on the street, while you're driving, everywhere. It is time for celebration. We officially launch it here on the show. Thank you, Faridah, for coming in as well. And we'll take a quick commercial break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with a lot more.